I loved talking to Niel Nickolaisen today. We talked about how to connect with people to make lasting change, and really how to put the emotional side of things over the logical side of things to change behavior, and using both to make sure projects move forward. Really about how to trust your people and how to build trust with the people you meet. I love the insights and the stories that were told there. And really how to fight the permission culture and to build a culture of trust. And that was so insightful. The emotional side of change management once again stood out to me, and how to build that relationship of trust, and a few books and other recommendations of how to do that with your team. Niel, thank you so much for joining. This is our part 2, but really part 3 because the technology glitched of our CIO Unscripted podcast. We want to welcome everybody to this. And really, we are here to get the real, raw experiences and insights from CIO leaders. And we're lucky to have Niel Nickolaisen as part of Valcom. He's our field CIO, CTO, and IT whisperer. He really has the experience being a CIO and IT leader for decades, and his insights we found insightful, and he's often cited on some of the biggest IT publications in the nation, and really love having you join and love your insight. So we're excited to get started. And
thanks, Mike, and I appreciate the fact that anytime you talk about me, you talk about the decades and decades of experience I have. Yes, I'm an old man. I recognize that. I don't know if I'm ashamed of it or proud of it. It's hard to know at this point. So
yeah, it comes with the wisdom, right? So we appreciate it. And so for those listening, he looks like he hasn't been in the IT industry for decades. So all right, well, we'll get started. So we've talked a lot about a lot of things, but I want to kind of get real and talk about the hard learned lessons on, let's start with leadership in the IT space.
So as we talked about last time, my path into IT was not traditional. I came from outside of IT directly into a CIO role. My superpower, it took me some time to figure out what my superpower was. I finally figured out it was, but my superpower had nothing to do with leading people. I'm a nerd. I tell people all the time, given my choice, I'd never talk to another human, unless maybe my wife and my children and my grandchildren, if I had my choice. And so I approached my early leadership opportunities. I had a complete lack of respect for culture. I had a complete lack of respect for the emotional connection to make with people, because my approach was, listen, this makes sense, this is logical, therefore it's the right thing to do, so just shut up and let's do the right thing. And by the force of my will, we were going to get things done. So I go from being sort of an individual contributor, not necessarily, but I'm in charge of operations for a consumer packaged goods company, to now a CIO. And the first thing I wanted to do, if you remember the story, is all their systems were homegrown, and I wanted to replace it with commercial, actually this crazy thing called tested software. So I convinced the organization to give me 14 months, $27 million, and a hand-picked team of 100 people to implement a new ERP system. This is back, this is some time ago when ERP was the thing you did. I had a core team of 10 people. I'd already been with the company a number of years, so I handpicked these 10 people. These are people I'd worked with, I trusted completely. And I was, at that time, ERP systems, implementations, they always blew through their budget. They always blew through their timeline. They were a train wreck. There were stories of other companies' examples where when they took their ERP live 3 years late, it pretty much shut the place down. And I'm like, I am not going to let that happen. I refuse to let that happen. So by the force of my will, I'm going to ensure we deliver this on time, on budget, and on scope. And so I became a tyrannical micromanager. And we delivered it on time, on budget, on scope. And I was so proud of myself. This is like the crowning achievement in the history of mankind. No one's done this better than I have. Because everyone around us takes 3 times as long, 4 times as much money, and then it's a big fail anyway. And so I was like at the high point of my life. And so we had a party, we had a celebration. Yeah, sure, there were some implementation issues, there always are, but we sorted through those pretty quickly. And so I feel like we're done. I'm really happy and proud. And those 10 people that I had handpicked came to me over the next couple of weeks, one by one. 2 came together. The 2 I thought I was closest to came together. And they said, whatever happens to us in the rest of our careers, we never want to work with you again. And that kind of hurt. Now, fortunately, I had a modicum of self-awareness to, instead of thinking, well, you guys are idiots, I thought to myself, maybe I'm the idiot. So I kind of did this, my journey through the desert where I'm analyzing myself, and the big epiphany I had was I picked really good people, and then I treated them like they didn't know anything. I did not trust them. And I thought back to the culture I was in. Fortunately, I was working for a great CEO, and he trusted me. He gave me direction. He gave me guidance. He was available to me, but he was like, Niel, here's the hill we need to take. Go take it. And I thought to myself, okay, I compare my approach to his, and I'm doing the exact opposite. So I've got to do this differently. And so from that point on, I kept experimenting and questioning myself. How do I do this? Am I doing this right? And I started to understand culture, where before, to me, culture, it was not something I even thought about, because, listen, logically, this is the right thing to do. This is what makes sense to do. Let's just go do this without any connection to what people were going through. Is this easy to do? Is this hard to do? Do I agree with him, yes or no? And so I started this evolution, and so I got to practice it through my next CIO gig, and then I got to practice it some more through my next CIO gig, and I tell you, I got better at it. I actually studied, I learned, I put in some feedback loops, so people would tell me, am I being a tyrannical micromanager? Am I being a jerk? Or am I getting better at this? And then I had the opportunity that was the biggest, one of the biggest turnarounds I've done in my career. So I got hired as the CIO. And the technology department in this company had 0 credibility. 0. In fact, when the president hired me, he said, to us, IT is a black hole. Projects go in and never come out. There was more shadow IT than IT, because the departments, various departments, couldn't get what they wanted, so they just hired their own people. And I had interacted a few times with the previous CIO, so I kind of knew what he was like. And he was kind of like what I was trying not to be. Sort of micromanagey, very permission-based. No one could do anything unless they asked him first. I call it a permission culture. And so I knew that's what the team had lived with, and I knew I wanted to be different. Not just to be different, but I'd learned that it worked. That this culture of trust, this culture of accountability worked. And so the first time I met with the whole team, kind of knowing the background, the attitude had been just shut up and do what I say. First of all, the first thing we did is we did a one-day exercise where very collaborative. Okay, everybody, what are the things we need to get done as a group? Let's kind of establish a baseline. What are the areas where we need to improve? Let's fill those gaps, and let's talk about what we should be doing. What does this organization need from us? So we kind of did a high-level strategic plan, but the strategic plan was also, what do we need to change about our processes and our culture? Let's hit that too. And then as we're wrapping up, I just said, okay, what you saw today was this is how we operate. Your people, you know what you do, you know what you're doing, you know what we need to do. And our rule of thumb is, once we've decided what matters most, you never need permission to do what matters most. You can act. I trust you to act. So we're going to spend our time together talking about what matters most. And once we're clear on what matters most, go. Go. You don't need permission. And I said, just so you know, this is the culture I operate in. You can ask for advice, you can ask for guidance, but I'm never going to tell you how to do anything. My focus is what matters and why it matters, and you own how. I'm out of the how business. And I said, by the way, it's obvious after a few days, we don't have enough meeting room space. I've got this great office with a table and whiteboards. It looks like I'm not going to be in my office a ton. So why don't you just check my schedule? If you need to use my office and I'm not in there, use it. I said, just do me a favor. I wanted to send this message about trust. I said, in my desk, sitting at my desk, the lower right-hand drawer has sensitive personnel information. If you're using my office, just do me a favor. Never look in that drawer. I would sometimes be gone for 2 weeks, and I never locked my office door, and I never locked my desk. Now, is that risky? Was somebody rifling through those files? Possibly. But if they were, their lack of trustworthiness, I think, would show up in other ways. So that's one where we came in. Remember, it's a black hole project. I started in August. In February, the president came to me and said, Niel, you got to slow IT down. We can't absorb all the stuff you're getting done. And all that shadow IT, they look at this culture that we're forming where people love to come to work. We're doing innovative stuff. We're pushing the boundaries. And so the shadow IT came to me and said, what would it take to join your team? It's because the university president, when he hired me, said, listen, there's a lot of shadow, he didn't call it shadow IT, there's a lot of departmental IT. Do you want me to mandate that everybody give it up and they join you? I said, no, let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes. And so to me, that was the completion of my 180-degree turn, where I'd gone from this person who you can't do anything without my permission. And if you don't do it my way, I'm not going to yell at you, but I'm going to be really disappointed in you that you didn't do it my way, because clearly I'm superior to you in every way. And if you're inferior to me, because if you look at the org chart, everyone eventually reports to me. There's a reason you report to me. It's because I'm superior to you. I'm exaggerating, but in practice, I think that's how I came off to this shift where the engine built itself. This high energy, high throughput, high quality team formed out of the same group of people that before never, quote unquote, never got anything done. And it was just, but to me, it was a slap in the face for how I was and how I needed to be. And that's a lesson. So that's now, 14, 15 years ago that I had this amazing experience where this IT department is flat on its back. It has no credibility. The risk of failure, if I try this new approach to leadership and culture, the risk is low. It's like the train has wrecked. Does anybody care that it's off the rails and crashed, I set it on fire? No, they don't. So the risk is low. I'm going to try this and see how it works out. But anyway, and so that lesson was so reinforced in my mind that I've just, ever since then, this sounds terrible. I've become kind of lazy, meaning people will come to me, hey, Niel, how should we do this? I'm like, figure it out. I'm not pushing them off. But, and it's sometimes it's hard for me because people will come to me with a problem I've solved 20 times before. the easiest thing in the world would be to say, okay, here's what you need to do. Here are the 3 things you should do. I've done this before, 20 times before, it worked every time. Here's what you should do. The harder thing for somebody like me is to help them figure out how to do that themselves. But I think at the same time, the other thing I've learned is by staying out of the how business, the team builds this amazing capability. So if the rest of the organization is looking at my IT team, what they see is this highly capable team, not just a highly capable leader.
Which is phenomenal. I have a few questions, and I want to dig deep into like the practicality of this. So when you have a phenomenal team, everyone's perfect, and they're high trustworthy, and you can leave your desk open and your office open, and they could rifle through it, but you have high trust. How do you deal with the nuances of not a high performer? And do you have any examples of when that just becomes readily apparent because you can't trust them and you have to make a change? And then what do you do? Or, hey, that's even more difficult to make a change because, yeah, it works when you have a phenomenal team that you can pass the ball to and they can run with it and score. But when you don't, what do you do? And then even more difficult than that is you have a low performer that you have to work with, and maybe you train them or you manage them out of the business, but it's really the more than mediocre employers, but just or employees that just we want to work with and they can, but it's just they don't know how. Like, how have you dealt with that? Because that seems like the real world.
Yeah, and that's a great example. So the first thing I've learned is I have to approach it from a perspective of trust rather than suspicion. Meaning, I'm assuming you're a high performer or want to be a high performer. You can always prove me wrong. Rather than, I'm going to assume you're not a high performer. Here's what it takes to prove to me you are.
So that perspective going into it is part of the
into the whole thing. Okay. So if you're struggling, let's call it that way. Let's say you're struggling. Okay, let's talk about what are the reasons why you're struggling. Do you lack the skills? Do we need to develop your skills better? Are there issues in the other parts of your life? Let's understand, because if you go in it from a perspective of trust rather than suspicion, you say, this person wants to do well, but something's stopping them from doing well. Okay, let's figure that out. But it could be, and I've had this happen, where they're just gotta go. They got to go.
Do you find that most of the time it is they just don't have the right vision and that they then step up and do the work? Like they haven't been given the right instructions or capability, the tools.
Yeah, and I think part of it is, so let's think about this. I want to create a culture of trust and accountability. Those are the 2 dimensions. High trust, high accountability. High accountability meaning if you say you're going to get something done, you're going to get it done. I don't have to follow up with you. I don't have to babysit. I need to check with you every 2 days to find out if you're on track. If you say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Well, people that aren't, okay, do you not understand why this matters? Because part of it's just connecting it to why does this matter? Because if it matters, I should get passionate about it. If it makes sense to me that this is important, okay? Because people don't like to do stuff that's not important, just in general. Okay, so how have I connected them to that vision of why? And if there are no other issues in the way, meaning they have the skills, I've tried to motivate them, they capture the vision, okay, then there's an issue. And the issue is it's outside of my control. So first pass is, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm a softie. I once had a network manager. We had a problem with our production deployment process. What I inherited was people just doing stuff. Okay, I don't need to test it. I'm fully confident in my ability to deploy this production change, and then it breaks. Okay, sorry, we don't do that anymore. Here are the rules. The rules are, before you deploy anything to production, you have to have defined and executed a valid test plan. In case you miss something in the test plan, there's got to be a way to roll it back within minutes or seconds. And we have to know what's coming. Don't surprise us. I had this guy that just wouldn't follow the rules. And I said, sorry, you are too high risk for me. You know, the first time he did it, first time he broke the rules, I said, hey, John, you can't do this anymore, and here's why. You destroy everyone's life. You take everything down. People can't do their work. You just can't do this anymore. Okay, Neil, I get it. Okay, any questions on the process? Do you need help developing a test plan? No, I got it. Okay, do you need help figuring out how to roll it back? No, I got it. And you'll let us know what's coming. Oh, yeah. Next time, did the same thing. So I said, John, sorry. I'm not a 3-strike guy on things like this. I'm a 2-strike guy. Sorry, John. It's obviously you don't understand why this matters. It's time for you to find something else. Another time I inherited a VP of software engineering, who spent his day going to every software engineer on the team, floating from desk to desk to desk. Okay, show me what you just wrote. Wow, that's kind of micromanagey. We're trying to create this culture of trust, culture of ownership. And I talked to him, I said, we don't do that anymore. And he said, that's all I know how to do. I said, well, let's talk about what a engineering leader does. Here's where I want your focus to be, not checking the code that people are writing. We've got other ways to test their code. I don't need a VP of software engineering who's a type reviewer, right? You're on the keyboard, you're not testing their keyboarding skills. There are different ways to do it. And tried this for a couple of months and just didn't get it. Just couldn't do it. Can't help myself. This is all I know how to do. I said, well, we've talked about what else you should be doing. Those are the things you're not doing. So I finally said, you know what your job is now? What, Neil? Your job is to find another job. Because I've tried. You know, it's like George Costanza. It's not you, it's me. Clearly, I failed in my ability to teach you how to do what the job is and what it entails. But this clearly isn't working. But I found that to be the exception rather than the rule.
Talk to us about some of the rules where where it's gone well, right? Like whether they've been communicated with well and they step up, and that's normally what happens.
So in one of my roles, you know, and again, inherited a team that had low credibility, low performing, kind of beat down and worn out. And I had this interesting, the manager over networking services. One of my beliefs is there are certain things called parity activities and systems, meaning we don't need to be inventive or creative when it comes to these parity things. Let's save our innovation for what creates competitive advantage in the marketplace for the organization. And we don't ever win any customers because we got this really cool network design or architecture. So I'm like, okay, we're having problems from a networking perspective. How does our network architecture compare to the reference architecture? Well, we got about 22 things we do that are different. Okay, talk to me why. Why is it that way? And my networking manager said, I've just found this works better. I said, okay, so there are about 1 billion other organizations in the world that use the standard architecture, the reference architecture. I don't think they have the problems we do. Well, how do you know that, Neil? I said, because the place I came from, we architected our network according to the reference standard. I never saw problems like this. So I'm just saying, there might be a thing here. No, you don't understand, Neil. You don't understand. I just heard this all. You don't understand, Neil. And I said, listen, here's what I want you to do. Let's do an experiment. What's that? Let's do a 6-month experiment. I want you, so here I'm getting pretty directive. I said, I want you to eliminate the gaps between our current architecture and the reference architecture. And let's measure for 6 months and see which worked better. But we're doing this with integrity. The integrity is, if your design works better, 6 months from now, I will say, let's go back to your design. And you have to have the integrity that says, 6 months later, the reference architecture works better. I will not fight it anymore. I said, that's the deal. He said, okay, that's the deal. So he went into it reluctantly, but after like out of the 22 changes, he makes like 6 of the 22, and he saw that it worked. I said, okay, problem solved. So I've always been able to get people to come along, but you do that not in one fell swoop. You do that incrementally, because I've used this model for years. This is the controlling, my controlling model when it comes to change management. As humans, we always prefer the familiar to the comfortable. So even if what we're doing today is uncomfortable, it's painful, we still prefer it to something that would be less painful and more comfortable. And we prefer the comfortable to the better. So we prefer the familiar to the comfortable to the better. Well, if I'm going to move somebody from the familiar to the better, I need to make the better both comfortable and familiar. How do I do that? And this is where I say Agile is an operating system, not a methodology. Because, okay, let's try this. Let's make this change and try it. But part of it's having the integrity that says, at the end of our pilot, were things better, yes or no? And if they're better, we keep it. If not, we throw it out. And you can do that with people to get them along the way, because it's hard to go in. I once followed a CTO who on the first day on the job said, okay, I know I've got a team of 50 Java engineers. Starting today, we're switching to Ruby on Rails. That's kind of a dramatic change. Well, instead, I would say, I would never do this. I would say, okay, I want to do an experiment with Ruby on Rails. How many of you want to be in the experiment? Let's get 3 or 4 of you and have you build something in Ruby on Rails and then come back and report to the team. How did it go? I do the same thing when I've implemented Agile and Lean wherever I go. I think those are the 2 most important things for improved delivery. You know, that place where I said where IT's a black hole, projects would never come out, and that's in August. In February, slow IT down. It's because we got good at Agile and Lean. And so our throughput went up dramatically. But in that case, I started Agile and Lean with 1 team. And I had the rest of the teams watch. They attended our sprint plans. They attended our sprint retrospectives. Why? So they could get familiar with it. And as we delivered over a couple of sprints, they got more comfortable with it because they were seeing it in practice, and they were also seeing the benefits. And so you can get people on board through experience, and because what I've learned is change, and really progress, is emotional, not logical. Early in my career, it was all based on logic. Listen, you boneheads, what you're doing doesn't work. I can show you the results. I can show you the outcomes. This company's losing money. It's lost money for 7 years in a row. So it makes no sense to me that you're defending the status quo. That was me 25 years ago. You dopes, it's obvious you need to change. No, it's not obvious. How do you make it obvious? Having them make an emotional connection to the results of the change. And first I got to get them to attempt the change. Not overnight, not we're going from Java to Ruby on Rails overnight. We're going to ease into it because it's going to generate a better outcome. 25 years ago with the company that lost money 7 years in a row, this is my analogy. I came in, I'm like, we got to change everything. The whole tech stack, our business processes, everything's got to change. And so I started pushing, not pulling, pushing. And my example was, it's like I'm pushing against this massive rubber band. And the first year, I made a lot of progress. But then the tension in the rubber band starts to grow and grow and grow. And it got to the point where the rubber band was stretched so tight, it flung me back. I'm not kidding you. The day I quit, spontaneous parties broke out in that organization. It's like the ding dong, the wicked witch is dead, the wicked witch is dead. It was the wicked warlock, me, because I'd upset everybody by treating like they had no idea what they were doing. Anyway, I'm kind of rambled a bit here.
So
I don't even know if we're talking about what you wanted to talk about.
I think we touch on something really important here. We have this very important tendency, because I think it allows someone to solve technical problems, right? It's like, hey, my tendency is to use logic to get things done, right? Like that is the nature of great IT people. Yet for people that they would rather say, hey, logically, this is how you do something, therefore it makes sense, so therefore go do it. But we're all emotional beings. I'm also thinking about what you said about you'd prefer not to talk or deal with people at all, right? Yet,
given my choice.
Yet, given the choice, but yet you found that connecting with people and over communicating with them is the most effective way to work on a team and to get the results you want. Talk to me about a few principles of that journey on the people side and the communication side. Like, how do you come to that? Is it just experience, or what would you tell a great IT leader, which I think we work with great IT leaders all day, every day, that maybe wants to improve their communication, maybe wants to improve their leadership and culture? I don't know if there's tools or books or other experiences. If you were to encapsulate that in a experience or how you learn that, I think that path would be very helpful.
Yeah, what I learned is, what I've learned over my career is the only way to make progress with people is to have a relationship of trust. If you don't have a relationship of trust with somebody, it's some kind of a push in the relationship. So, there's a book, I can't remember what it's called. But the essence is, the motto is win-win or walk away. To every relationship, there has to be a win-win, not a win-lose. And I take that same approach with my technology providers. We're in this together. We have to have a relationship of trust. So then the next question is, how do I build a relationship of trust with everyone in my life? And so what are the characteristics and practices of people you trust? And I would just always reflect that back on myself. Why the people I trust, why do I trust them? So it comes to the credibility part, meaning I'm good at what I do. I care about you. And I demonstrate that I care about you. Because I would often, I really care about these people, but I never expressed it, never showed it in any way, shape, or form. How do they know I care about them? I care about the mission of the organization. That's the why. There's a great motto from Built to Last, that book that's like 800 years old now, said, people trust you if you put purpose over personal agenda. So I'm always asking myself, am I doing this because it'll be good for me or good for them, good for the project, good for the organization? Purpose of the person, the project, the organization is always more important than my personal agenda. Because if they question my motives, we're never going to have a relationship of trust. I've got to paint a vision for them that's realistic. Because if it's too unrealistic, you're like, this guy can't deliver this crazy idea. I'll give you just an example. I got to one of my organizations, and our outcomes were terrible, just absolutely terrible. And I said, listen, here's where we want to go. This is our long-term goal. We're going to deliver technology services to our customers and to our employees that amaze them. That's our long-term goal. And the short-term goal is, we're going to stop embarrassing ourselves. Because right now we're sort of embarrassing as a team. So our goal is we're proud of what we do. That's our first goal. We're proud of our results. And then we're going to move to amaze. Because proud, we could kind of see a path forward to being proud of rather than embarrassed by what we were doing. We couldn't make that connection yet to amaze until we were proud of it. Now, the other thing I've learned is there's a great book called Made to Stick. It's probably another 800-year-old book by the Heath brothers. And they're marketers. Because one of the most important lessons I've learned about communication is study marketing. Market IT. I've had active campaigns where we're marketing IT to change the perceptions of the IT department. I'm going to brand IT. I've got a brand strategy for my department. And in Made to Stick, the Heath brothers use this acronym, SUCCES. S, keep your messaging simple. What do we do as technologists? We complicate things. Keep it simple. The U is communicate something that's unexpected. People remember the unexpected. The first C is make it concrete. This kind of goes back to simple. Make it usable, consumable. Second C is credible. You have to have credibility. The E is touch their emotions. And the final S, which is the most important S, people remember stories. They remember stories over facts. So I've gotten really good at collecting stories and telling stories. I'll give you an example. And one of my roles, our ERP system, they'd implemented it 25 years before. Over the course of those 25 years, they'd so heavily customized it. I counted tens of thousands of customizations. I'm not kidding. Over 20,000 customizations. Well, it's time now to plan the upgrade. We're on the upgrade path, and I want to leverage the upgrade to clean up a lot of these customizations. Well, factually, I can blow people away and say, we got over 20,000 customizations, but I guarantee you, whoever asked for those customizations had a valid reason for asking for them. So logically, I'm not going to make that connection. It's emotionally. So I tell this story, let's look what happened a year ago. India changed their tax structure. There's now this thing called the GST. Our ERP provider provided a Indian GST package that most of their customers deployed in about 2 weeks. Because we have to navigate through all those customizations, it took a team of 6 people, and that's just the IT team, not the finance and accounting team. It took us 9 months to deploy that package instead of 2 weeks. Okay, let's look at it in the context of organizational agility. We're competing against companies that could make that change in 2 weeks. It took us a team of 6 IT people plus accounting and finance and tax people 9 months. Who do you think is more agile from an organizational perspective? And can we get serious about moving some of these barriers to our agility? So it wasn't about whether somebody needs the customization. It was about what do we do to improve organizational agility in a time when our competitors are moving faster than we are.
How you tell that story is impactful, and that is so.
And so you pick up. You've just got to be aware of. I need to tell stories. When I talk to the board, when I talk to the executive team, I'm telling them stories. I'm talking about outcomes, not technology. I can't remember the last time I've talked to anybody about a technology. People ask me all the time, how come the CFO once asked me, he said, how come everything you request gets approved? I said, I only ask for things that you should approve. He said, well, how do you know what we should approve? I said, because I understand the needs of the organization. And I know how to tell the story about matching the needs of the organization to what we're proposing.
Niel, this is so insightful. We need to do this again. I'm super excited we're going to do this. We're going to do a third one. And we are going to remember that we're going to talk about next time, approach vendor and technology selection, like how to do that, how to prepare and predict some of the future and see the trends coming. That will be in our next one. Niel, thank you so much.
Hey,
Let's do
Mike.
this again, and looking forward to the next one.
I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Have a good one. We'll see you.